When Queen Elizabeth II sailed into Sydney at Farm Cove on February 3, 1954, she became the first reigning British monarch to ever set foot on Australian soil. Over the next 7 decades, Queen Elizabeth II would go on to visit our shores 16 times before her death early this morning. Arriving for that first time as a 27-year-old, the stylish young queen literally stopped the nation. Live updates: a moment of great sadness, New King's tribute to Queen ElizabethREAD MORE, the life and achievements of Queen Elizabeth II. The Sydney Morning Herald reported the Queen, along with her husband Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, received the most tumultuous greeting Sydney has ever given any visitor. Police estimates put the crowd of people lining the city streets and Farm Cove at 1 million, the newspaper reported. At least another 500,000 man every foreshore vantage point from the heads to the bridge in perfect weather, the article read. This was in a city with an estimated population of 1.86 million. Explained, Operation Unicorn: what happens after the Queen's death in Scotland? Queen Elizabeth II had planned to visit Australia 2 years earlier, before her coronation. However, Princess Elizabeth was en route to Australia, and staying in a safari lodge in Kenya, when her father King George VI died and she had to rush home. "I have always looked forward to my first visit to this country, but now there is the added satisfaction for me that I am able to meet my Australian people as their queen," she said when she finally arrived. Standing at last on Australian soil, on this spot that is the birthplace of the nation, Farm Cove, Sydney, "I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey throughout Australia." What followed was a blockbuster tour stretching over a mammoth 56 days, with the royal couple visiting every Australian capital except Darwin and 70 country towns. By the time Australia waved a farewell to its young and glamorous monarch, it was estimated that about 75% of the population had been given the opportunity to catch a glimpse of her in person. The Queen and Prince Philip returned to Australia in 1963 for Canberra's Jubilee celebrations, 50 years on from the naming of the capital. This time the royal couple visited all states and territories, including the Northern Territory. Read more: a timeline of the Queen's recent health struggles. It was during the Queen's visit to a Canberra golf course during this trip that a new invention from Ciro's entomologist Doug Waterhouse became famous: Aeroguard. Government House staff made sure the Queen was liberally sprayed before heading off for a game of golf. Journalists following the Queen noted the absence of flies around the official party, and word about Ciro's new fly repellent spread, the story goes, according to CSIRopedia. The Queen was back on Australian soil in 1970 to help celebrate the bicentenary of Captain James Cook sailing up the east coast of Australia. Almost 40 years later, in 2009, it was revealed the royal couple were the targets of an assassination plot during that 1970 visit. Former Detective Superintendent Cliff McHardy told media outlets the unsophisticated plan consisted of placing a large wooden log across railway tracks near Lithgow, in the Blue Mountains, in a bid to derail the royal train. The train struck the logs but thankfully remained on the tracks. More visits to Australia followed in 1973, 1974 and 1977 as the monarch helped Australia celebrate significant milestones. With each visit, the Queen continued to draw huge crowds. Melbourne turned on a warm welcome for the Queen at the start of her 36-hour Silver Jubilee visit to Victoria today. Tens of thousands of people stood 10 deep behind barricades the length of Elizabeth and Swanston streets to welcome the royal couple to Melbourne. The Canberra Times reported in 1977. Queen Elizabeth II came again for the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane in 1982. When the Queen officially closed the Games, she was driven around the stadium while the Australian team formed a guard of honour running alongside her car. Read more: Australians can expect shock to system from new King, but the Queen's visits to Australia, while popular, have not been without controversy. These visits have also drawn protest and debate over Australia's constitutional position. Dr. Cindy McCreary, an expert on the British monarchy in the University of Sydney's Department of History, says, Republicans have argued that the monarchy is outdated, irrelevant and unrepresentative of our modern, multicultural nation, while some Indigenous Australians have appealed to the Queen to redress their legal, constitutional and social disadvantage. After a visit in 1992, the Queen did not return to Australia again until 2000, sparing her from facing direct questions about the 1999 referendum on the Republic. The Queen's visit to Australia in 2011 was dubbed her farewell tour by royal watchers because it was considered very likely to be her last visit down under. They were right. The 85-year-old monarch and her husband Prince Philip, who was then 90, visited Canberra, Brisbane, Melbourne, and Perth during the trip and were greeted by crowds in the thousands. At a reception in her honour held at Parliament House in Canberra, then Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, described the Queen as a vital constitutional part of Australian democracy. The Queen in turn expressed her sympathy for the Australians still recovering from devastating bushfires. Read more, How Australians Can Pay Tribute to Queen Elizabeth. It has been a difficult year for this country in many ways despite the successes, the Queen said. The world witnessed the anguish of Australians as they lived through a summer of national disasters. We were all inspired by the courage and resolution shown by those affected in the face of crippling desolation. Ever since I first came here in 1954, I have watched Australia grow and develop at an extraordinary rate. This country has made dramatic progress economically in social, scientific and industrial endeavours, and above all in self-confidence.